Cool, guys. So we are going to get started here. We're going to talk this week about hunger cues. So without further ado, right? So pull up this presenter slide. At the end, we're going to wrap up with questions. So feel free to start there. Okay. Awesome. So hunger cues. So why are we talking about hunger cues, and how does this kind of fit in with folks and what we're doing? Let me hang on one second. I forgot to mute you guys all. You can unmute yourselves by hitting *6 if you're on I don't think anybody's on the phone, but you can unmute yourself at the bottom here. Just for background noise. I'm hoping that's helpful. Awesome. Now for real. All right, cool. So why are we talking about hunger cues? And how does this kind of relate to some of the stuff that we're doing already? So we talk a lot about how this is really meant to be a sustainable shift for folks, and how this really works to build lifelong habits instead of being a diet. So why not a diet? And there's a lot of critique around diet culture in the world of dieting. It's a multi-billion-dollar market that gets people to buy a lot of shit, right? It's pretty intense, the level of commercial and money that goes into convincing you to buy stuff to be healthier, from foods to programs to shakes to everything. But really the common threads around dieting, a lot of times there can be a whole different varieties of diets, but often they're extreme. Often they're difficult to stick to in the long term. They have a bunch of rules, which makes it so hard. And about 2.3%, so more than half, I think it's 95% of people who diet will regain the weight that they originally lost, if not more. So really that's when we were looking at launching a nutrition program for the gym, sustainability was really a key piece of that. So dieting, research has shown, has been a predictor of health issues, right? And so not even just being overweight, but the practice of dieting and yo-yoing your weight up and down can be a predictor of lifelong health issues. So what the shift is towards intuitive eating. So that can be, if folks might be familiar with that, but what intuitive eating is basically the natural way we eat. A lot of people think of intuitive eating and they think automatically that eat everything and anything, right? It's not that. Babies, when they're born, they know, they cry when they're hungry, they stop when they're full. You're born with natural eating cues and hunger cues. And so through time, culturally, through our family, through practice of dieting, we lose touch of our natural cues because of outside influences. I know I came from a clean plate family, you finish your plate. And that was with the best intentions, but it comes with consequences. It comes with losing those intuitive cues on how to eat. And so intuitive eating has been research-based and shows that when you get back in touch with your hunger cues, your body naturally limits calories in a way that helps serve your energy needs, that helps serve you. So really getting in tune with hunger cues is really one of the most basic practices of intuitive eating. So weight gain is a result of loss of natural hunger cues. So that's really why we're talking about this, and how can I give you some tools that help you in the long term? That's really my work through all this. So people who have practiced intuitive eating tend to have a better body image. They do less binge eating. A lot of people think of that as extreme, but sitting down and eating a whole pint of ice cream can be considered binge eating. So if you also, people who have who practice intuitive eating have better behavioral and psychological long-term impacts. Diets can be traumatizing, and that sounds extreme, right? But I know for me, and moving into an intuitive eating practice, thinking through my patterns of being really good and then falling off the rails and then being really good, that's traumatic to your metabolism. That's traumatic to your psychological relationship with food. So really it takes eating into a new level and away from the rules and the restrictions. And away from unhealthy weight control practices. And so when you guys ask me like, should I limit stuff later? Should I fix this because this meal wasn't good? Or if I have a treat tonight, should I eat less? So that is all unhealthy weight control practices. And so that is from like the industry that has told us, oh, well, limit here, and literally has been marketed for you to think that way. And really, like, physiologically, your body doesn't function that way. It needs those calories. And and also psychologically, shit happens, like, right? You get in a fight with a friend, you eat those bad foods, you move on, right? And so like that, how do we kind of put this into practice with some of your eating? So let's talk a little bit about hunger cues. What is hunger? Okay, hunger is a natural body cue. It's that feelingness of the emptiness in your stomach. It's a signal that your body needs more fuel. A lot of times we're indoctrinated that like hunger is natural when you're trying to clean up your diet. Well, not really. We should be paying attention to hunger cues. It's a natural regulation of caloric intake. So it's not only like, when am I hungry, but like, when am I full? When am I done? So like being able to stop and check in with yourself while eating, to stop when you're done eating. A lot of times I can't count how many times I finished a meal and I'm like, that was so good and I'm so full. Right? So that's an indication too of being out of touch with that natural hunger cues. So hunger is a good thing. It's a good way, and that fullness hunger cues and getting in touch with them is a great way to get back to like how you were intended to eat. Hunger is not an emergency. It's not a reason to be grumpy. We'll talk about how hunger presents itself, but once I am definitely like a hangry person, right? But like once I got more in tune with like, oh, that's hunger, oh, I should address it, versus, oh, that's hunger, I'm not hungry, I just need to drink water. Okay, maybe that's the case, and we'll talk about how to get there. But like a lot of times we're neglecting real hunger, and that does make us grumpy. So getting back in tune can help you like get in control of that like hangry, right? And it's not something that you should ignore. So what does hunger cues look like? And I was talking to someone yesterday about this. So hunger can look different for different people. I have a lot of clients who are like, I'm not really hungry. Well, hunger can look different for different people. You could be like the typical, like my stomach's growling, that's what I'm hungry. But like, if you don't get that sensation, hunger can present itself in different ways. So some basics like losing focus, bad breath, heartburn, headaches, nausea, anxiety, panic, just general discomfort, feeling agitated, fantasizing and thinking about food. This was a big wake-up call for me. When I was doing CrossFit at the beginning, I was thinking about food all the time. I was under eating. And once I finally started getting my calories up, I like wasn't thinking about a steak throughout my workout. Like, I know that sounds ridiculous, but some of you may relate to that. So thinking and fantasizing about foods is a huge indication. So also difficulty making decisions. So my other job is about like getting basic foods to make your brain function well. Literally, you're inhibiting your brain function when you're not giving yourself enough calories. So making sure that like, if you have that fog, if you could be sleep, but a lot of times it could be hunger. So difficulty making decisions. So especially if you're like, well, I don't really get hungry, think through some of these other ways that hunger cues in your body. It's definitely a practice that you get into to kind of be more aware. So what we use to help tune into and learning more about your patterns of hunger and fullness, we use this intuitive eating hunger scale. So it's a tool to help you improve this practice of fullness, of knowing when you're satisfied, but also knowing when you should eat. I know it's almost silly, right, that we're talking about something this basic, but I think as we've talked through this a little bit, it might make sense why like we're digging back into this. So we think of hunger on a scale of hunger and fullness on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is absolutely starving, extreme hunger, and 10 is feeling so full that you feel sick. Okay. So how should you use this scale? When to know like when to eat, I always tell folks who are using this scale and working more towards intuitive eating that you want to eat around a 3 or a 4. So let me go back to that. So 3 or 4 is like you're maybe starting to get some symptoms of hunger. you're feeling pretty clearly those symptoms. Not to the point where you're hangry, not to the point where you have a headache or having like manifesting some other more uncomfortable symptoms, okay? So you're just starting to get some of that stuff. I always encourage folks to sit and be comfortable with your hunger. A lot of times, if it's anxiety, like if hunger presents itself as anxiety for you, or as like, oh, I really could use an ice cream sundae right now, sit with yourself, get comfortable with your hunger for a minute. Could you eat an apple right now? I do this with my kids all the time. Like, well, my oldest, that she'll ask for a snack at night. And I'm like, would you like some carrots? And she's like, no. I'm like, well, are you really hungry? Right? So I practice that with yourself as well, right? Is it a craving, or is it like a hankering for something sweet, or are you actually hungry? So sitting with yourself, if you're still like for an hour thinking about food, you're probably hungry, okay? So come back to that and pay attention, trust yourself, okay? Every meal is an opportunity to learn. Sometimes like you'll eat that meal and then maybe, or like that snack or something, maybe at halfway through you're like really, really full. And like, that might be an indication that you're like, maybe I wasn't really that hungry. So every meal is an opportunity. Every snack is an opportunity. And like thinking about it that way and giving yourself some grace that like, this takes time and this takes practice to tune into, okay? So knowing when to stop eating. So we talked about this, but the natural fullness cue is like feeling that like heaviness in your stomach. So like that emptiness, that ache, that grind, right? And then versus like the slight pressure in your stomach once you start to eat. This is like very much intuitive eating, very much like, and when I first started like learning about intuitive eating and training about it, I was like, this feels a little hippy dippy. It can be, right? But it's like really being present in the moment of eating. How many times me sitting at my desk, like eating, trying to get work done, trying to feed the kids, like popping things in my mouth. It's different and harder to be able to identify those hunger signals with your meals. So it could be that you can practice one day or one meal, I mean, to be able to tune into these hunger cues. So it really, really being sure that you're like taking time to, we'll talk about like implementing this a little bit, but like that fullness, it's not always like a natural thing to do. And like I mentioned before, you can be like me and part of a family of a clean plate club, like you finish your plate, or like you eat a meal out and you're like, well, I paid a lot for this meal, I'm going to eat it all. But also like me coming from a history of macros, like I built my plate and I was like, okay, these, I need to eat everything. And I can't tell you how many times I was eating and eating and eating. And I'm like, oh, I'm not really hungry, but like, I got to hit my macros, or, oh, I have my points that I need to meet. So it's really like all those things have conditioned us to like ignore some of those fullness signs. So eating until you're satisfied and like no longer having that emptiness in your stomach. Again, that takes practice, just like learning those hunger cues, paying attention through your meal and being present and mindful with that. Thinking of it too, like, and if you struggle with like, I don't want to waste food, that more than that is a waste, right? Like you could spend those calories later, not that you have like an allotment in the day, but like you're setting yourself up to be uncomfortably full, right? And like you could eat, it could affect your other meals, right? So a lot of times too, like say I'm super full and not hungry for dinner. Well, did I overeat at lunch? So it could bleed into other parts of your day, if that makes sense. So how to stop eating when you're full. Again, this is practice. So every meal is an opportunity to learn, being gentle and giving yourself grace. That know that like you have probably spent most of your adult life ignoring those things, whether it's like well-intentioned or not, right? So take an assessment every time you eat. And this, like, especially because we're starting, and I'm always talking about starting small, maybe it's one meal a day. Maybe it's your one meal that you maybe can sit down for, especially, but take that assessment after you eat, right? How are you feeling? Could you work out an hour after that eating that? A lot of times by saying like, definitely couldn't eat when I work out. Well, maybe we're eating too much, right? Like maybe we're not stopping when that natural fullness cue is coming. So some suggestions on like how to slow down, or if you're like part of that clean plate club, right? Like slow down, put your fork down in between bites, drinking water, all things that you've probably heard about if you've been like in the world of dieting, but really in the goal of like, you don't want to make yourself feel uncomfortable after you eat, and you want to be able to enjoy your next meal, right? So also removing distractions really helps. It's hard to tune into what you need to be paying attention to in your body when you're like scrolling through your phone or when you're on your computer. It is definitely one of the pillars of like intuitive eating is removing distractions from eating. Slowing down, like this is like a huge piece for many folks. I know my husband like can finish a meal in literally 6 minutes. But like slowing down, especially, you know, if you're busy, like things like that. But a lot of times we just do that naturally. Just slow down. You can always eat more later. So if you're also worried about, like if this stresses you out, right? So here's like some tips, right, that are going to help knowing that following these hunger cues are going to serve you, right? So you can always eat more later. You can put extra food away. Like if you don't want to waste that food, you can come back to it later. Also, like if you know, like you're a seconds person and you are full, but like it's so good that you want to keep eating it. That's a lot of times when I eat at my parents' house, they cook like amazing food, but like put your dish away, wash your dish, go plan an activity. We do walks after dinner every day. Sometimes not like what my daughter wants to do, but it really helps us to kind of like shift and like move away from the table. And practice. This is all going to require practice and like just starting slowly with one step at a time. So one meal at a time, ideally. So that's the piece on hunger cues. I'm going to open it up first. Let's open it up right now and see if you have any questions. Do you guys have any questions about hunger cues? Pretty straightforward. Awesome. Cool. Hearing none. I'm going to open it up at the end too. So I just want to pause there for a second. Plan a treat Saturday. You ready? Ready for the guidelines? So, well, first, like why are we planning a treat? Because this is meant to give you lifelong habits. If I said for 4 weeks, don't have a treat, then I am basically like, I don't know what I'm doing, but like I'm being completely contradictory to what I'm saying to everything else. You should plan your treat. You should have your treat. Make a plan though. And life is not meant to be living with restriction. Restriction is what causes that stress, what causes this to be short-term versus long-term. So it helps with being like later. And we talked about like that pressure building up, right? And not being able to have a treat then ends up maybe being more and more treats or a whole cheat day. This is not a cheat day. This is intentionally and mindfully planning your treat, just like you have been doing with your plates, right? So the guidelines, you must be hungry and it must be really good. Okay, that's it. All right. So be hungry. Don't just do it because you're like, oh, I need to have a hot fudge sundae today. Well, no, use that opportunity to practice your hunger cues and have it be delicious. And that's really it. Okay. I know that's hard. I know that might be hard for folks, especially coming off of years of dieting. And if you're like, well, I just don't want to do it this week, recognize that you might be building some pressure, right? And if you're a person who falls off and comes back on, maybe not in a huge way, but if you do, realize that that's because you're putting a lot of restriction on yourself. So that's my advice around the treat. I have a lot of clients who are always like, do I have to have a treat? I was like, are you going to have a treat though this week? Are you? Because you are, like 95% of people, right? The last is we do a mini challenge. We talked about posting our meal plans, right? For week 1. Week 2 is a little bit of physical activity. So we are going to do a 2-minute plank each day. If you're down, if that's like, I can't hold a 2-minute plank, do 1:30. Can't do a minute, 30 seconds, do a minute. Can't do a minute and 30, do 30 seconds or less, right? So pick a time that makes sense for you. And that's what we're going to do each day. Okay. My suggestion is like, do it either first thing when you get up in the morning, pick a time that's going to be consistent each day. And then that way it'll just be easier if that works for you. If that's stressful, do it around your workouts. But this is our goal for the week. Okay. Cool. I'm going to stop sharing this. I can't unmute you all, but if you can unmute yourself. Does anybody have questions? Like, and everything's on the table. Like, you can ask whatever you need.
Okay, I have a couple questions.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go for it.
Okay, so my first question is about the treat. I feel like I treated myself yesterday. So can that have been my treat? And like, because I feel like today I want to get back on like track.
Yeah, so if you've already done a treat this week, cool. Okay. And know that too. Like, maybe reflect back on that treat. Was it mindful? Was it like, were you hungry when you ate it? Like, revisit some of that stuff. Whereas like, I know because you posted, but like, maybe you could have brought that home if you weren't really hungry. So like, tuning in your treats to into your hunger cues will help build that skill.
Okay. And then my other question is, like, at what point do we start weighing and measuring like ourselves and that kind of like, should we be trying to steer away from that, like, and just focusing on the food on our plate and not worrying anything about like a scale number or a measurement and that kind of thing?
Right. So no weighing, no measuring for this.
So
whole
leave
challenge.
It alone. Okay.
Yeah.
Can that be part of the challenge, is put your scale away?
Yeah. And like, that can be like, if that's a thing for you, for real. I literally had to take the batteries out of my scale. Like, I'll admit it. Like, I was just like, and it's a shift. And I can tell you, so when I start one-on-one with clients, they work with me for 3 months minimum, and nobody weighs and nobody measures. Like, by and large, there's a few exceptions, and we're working slowly to like back off on that a little bit, because like, it's individual, right? So have that as perspective. I need to see you do this for 3 months typically. And that gives you the food freedom to then like, weighing and measuring really gets to, okay, so I'm close to my body composition goal of your body fat percentage. And then I'm working towards that. Right. But yeah, 9 times out of 10, I'm like, we're not losing. Well, you're probably not eating enough, because we can tell by looking at your plate, like what that is. So like, we can always help you on that. Does that make sense? Any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
What about hunger that seems to come on like really quickly? Is that more just like paying attention to those like cues earlier and earlier before you get there? Or is that just something like specifically with me? Because I do have like, I can have like blood sugar issues. So yeah.
So it might be that you're missing some warning signs, right? Like, if you might be so used to tuning out that hunger signals that there might be some more subtle hunger signals that are happening first. So if you especially like have a specific time of day where you're like, I just get super hungry by noon. One of my clients this week, I was like, we should be having our big meal at like, because we're working specifically on hunger cues and intuitive eating. She should have her big meal at 11 o'clock, because that's when she's hungry. And she's like, why am I following arbitrary times to eat? Exactly. Right. Like, this is a practice, and that like, your body's going to signal your low blood sugar before you have that crash typically. Right. And it's it's slowing down, paying attention to what's happening in your body and getting in tune with those cues.
Okay.
Is that helpful? Or?
Yeah. Cause when my stomach feels hungry, it's too late. Like,
Yep. Cause you're probably at like, I forgot which way I'm going, like 9 or 10, right? Like, you're probably like way over on the scale of like starving. Right. And a lot of people are like, I'm not starving. People are starving. I get it. Right. Like I'm not trying to, I'm sensitive to that stuff. So cool.
Okay.
So I would encourage you, I'm sure you probably have a certain time of day where that happens. Like, is it typically the same time of day?
Sometimes when I'm at work, I don't like eat lunch. I eat like a protein bar or a protein shake or something like that. Like I'll have like those types of things like throughout the day. Like I don't stop and eat because that works better for me like with my workflow. So if I get really busy with work and am not paying attention, I'll have gone like way too long by the time I'm hungry. And then also around like 3 or 4 o'clock, like a little bit before dinner, I'll also feel like I need something.
Okay. And like another rule of thumb, if it's really hard to kind of like figure out that, like rule of thumb, you should eat every 3 hours.
Yeah.
If that feels excessive, like you should be checking in with yourself at least every 3 hours. So maybe that's setting an alarm on your phone. I know that you mentioned that with water, right? That you're doing that. So like maybe we have like some hunger alarms, like how am I feeling? Like checking in, going to that scale, like maybe take a screenshot of that scale from 1 to 10 and like literally say what number am I at right now? Rather than like, do I feel anything? Like use the scale because that's like a concrete measurement.
Okay, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Okay, good. Awesome. Brian, do you have a question?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
I just, all right. Hey, I was wondering about times for, like, say, like this morning I kind of slept in a little bit and I usually get up around, earlier, a couple hours earlier. So I didn't know how to like portion. I just used like the plate method, but I use that plate method for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So, so it seems like a lot to eat for breakfast. You know what I mean? Because I'm using the same amount for breakfast and for dinner. But that's correct, right?
Yep. So, and if your plates are feeling like you'll be able to figure out your plates a little bit better, like as this goes on, right? But as a rule of thumb, like as you're building it, like the basics, right? I always tell people start clockwise, right? So if you're and I don't know if this is backwards, but like, so you're starting with your veggies here, you eat your veggies, you come over to your protein, and then at your starches, if you're full, stop there. Okay. So a lot of people are like, oh, I'll eat my carb, maybe have some protein, but I'm not really hungry for my veggies. Well, start with your veggies, eat that. And like, if you're throwing it all together in a shake, like just pay attention, like instead of gulping the whole thing down, like take sips versus like knocking it back.
Now, since I'm so close to lunch, because I had breakfast pretty much at 10 o'clock, so you definitely scale that down a little bit, right? Because you don't want to be eating.
Or wait till you're hungry.
Okay.
Unless you're on like are you at work to have like a schedule time to eat, or are you home today?
I'm at my own job today. But,
okay.
So I bring my lunch with me though.
Cool. So. If you have the flexibility to wait till 1 or 2, do that. Yeah. Pay attention to like the whole point. Pay attention to how you're feeling. If you're not hungry at lunchtime, don't eat. Wait, but don't wait until you're like starving, right? Once you start to feel that hunger, whether it's however it presents itself for you, that's when you take your break for lunch. Does that make sense?
Okay, so yeah, it's when you're hungry, not so much time. So okay, that's what I get.
Yep.
Okay.
But like if we're skipping like all our meals, like that's a different conversation, right? So I want you to still be eating 3 balanced meals a day. Ideally, like checking in with yourself every 3 hours for eating. Does that make sense?
And if you're not so active that day, then probably find something to be active, because otherwise you're not going to get to your point to be hungry enough to have those 3 meals.
I mean, you can still have hunger cues and be inactive. You know what I mean? Your body still needs fuel. You're going to still need fuel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And paying attention to those hunger cues will naturally limit, like when you eat, like you might not finish your plate, or you could, it depends on your metabolism too. So it's not always like, as basic as that. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah. But if you drain all your fuel out of your tank, then you're gonna be really hungry.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Good. Awesome questions. Good. Anyone else? Any questions? Cool.
I kind of have a question again. Sorry.
Good.
So I just feel like, so like you said, with the practicing of things, like I feel like once I open the floodgates of eating, I just feel like I want to eat, like, and eat and eat and eat and eat some more. So like you're saying, like when you're having those meals, like to really slow things down, like go do something after, like, and that chances are I'm not actually hungry. I just, because I started that eating, I just feel like I need to continue to eat.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, there's a lot behind like intuitive eating. Like why, like, and we, like, you could go there. Like, why am I hungry? Like, how am I feeling? Like, I posted something on social the other day about like pausing, like really checking in with yourself. Like, is it emotional stuff? Is it, but yes. So looking at that why, like that walking away and getting it. And if you walk away and like, I'm still hungry, like an hour later, eat something else, like go back to your dinner, right? But like a lot of times walking away gives you that perspective, right? And helps you kind of check in with yourself or like get back in tune with that hunger cue, right? That's a big like nighttime snacking practice for me, like, cause that's a culprit for me. That I'm like, oh, like I'm watching TV, my kids are in bed, like I can have like things that I wouldn't have in front of them because I try to like eat well in front of them. But like, so really checking in with myself on hunger cues there and like drinking some water and like paying attention there.
So
Yeah,
also, I'm sorry, everybody. Like, feel free to jump in. I know I'm like hogging this, but so I was talking with some of the other members at the gym about like having, cravings of different things like mac and cheese and that kind of, or like pizza, and like how like I've been looking for better alternatives to things that could like satisfy those in terms of like, like a lean cuisine type of thing. And I'm like, they promote that they've got protein and that kind of stuff, like, more natural-ish ingredients, but I know they're obviously still not. So it's like, what's your take on like, if you are sticking a lean cuisine in to like satisfy your mac and cheese craving or your pizza craving type of thing?
So, I mean, I feel my number one thing is like, if you want mac and cheese, like build that into your plate method, have that be your starch, right? Like, it's not ideal. I wouldn't add, like, it's not ideal for every meal, right? Like, you're not having lean cuisine, breakfast, dinner, 7 days a week. Like, not because lean cuisine, well, not because it's mac and cheese, but because it's processed, right? Like, we want to get to whole, like real foods, right? So my suggestion is like, put it in your plate method. So maybe you're not eating that full lean cuisine, like you're eating that quarter plate of it. And it's like, I don't know how they can, but like, I don't know how many you would get out of it, but you could get 2 to 3 out of it, right? Some other folks do like some prepared like stir fry stuff, frozen stir fry stuff, but then take their own veggies and like bulk it up with that. So that's like my advice. Like, if you want to go that route, fine. And if like your all-time favorite thing is lean cuisine mac and cheese, like I want you to eat it. Like, I build it into your plate method and make it work for what you're doing. Does that make sense? And I'm glad you're keeping asking questions, because I'm sure everyone else here is like, ooh, yeah, I like this, but in their own way, right? And I see people being like, oh yeah, like that. So it's good that you're asking questions. I'm glad. Cool.
I'm usually one of those people that comes on and is like, I want to ask 600 questions as well. But I think you've just totally tapped into something that is so uncomfortable for me. I'm sitting here so uncomfortable, and not because you make me uncomfortable. It's because I realize that I really don't have a handle on when I'm hungry and when I'm not, like, at all. This is like 25 years of just obsessing and loving food, where food is like your activity. And I get so much pride and like gold stars out of showing you, look at my beautiful food that I've put on the Facebook group. And I'm just like, wow, like this is so eye-opening to me. Thinking about actually sitting there and being introspective about, am I actually full? Am I actually hungry? I think this is going to be a really interesting week.
Cool. Awesome. And so this like goes right along with what you're doing already with your plate methods, right? It's like beautiful plate, then like now, right, let's get introspective. That's awesome. That's really great feedback. I'm glad that, and I hope that this is helpful. And if you're really struggling, like, let me know and let's talk about it. And also like that discomfort, right? Like I'm sure you already know this, like this discomfort is like the catalyst of change, right? Beauty happens in the discomfort. It's out of that comfort zone. Like we're all used to regular diets, right? We're all used to limiting calories and being on the plan, and we're not used to doing this. And this is what like my goal for you all is like game changer. Like I want this stuff to be lifelong game changing stuff versus like, what can I do in 4 weeks and lose 10 pounds? And like, that's important. I don't want to diminish that, but you know what I think you know where I'm getting at. Cool. You guys have such good questions and give me such good feedback. I love it. I love this group. I'm going to be like sad. I'm already sad if it's there's an ending in sight. So, but you guys are doing great. There's a hunger cue reminder in your app. Okay. So you still have your plate method reminder for you to do each day. Make sure that you are checking those off. That's a way to keep yourself accountable. I do want to bring up, there's only been a few folks who have done the videos. So I just want to touch on that really quick. So make sure that, like I know that Kim did, because she made those meatloaf muffins. That was part of like the questions this week. So let me pull this up. I want to make sure that you guys are doing your program. So at the bottom here, I don't think you can see my mouse, but can you see my mouse like when I do that? Okay, at the bottom here, the program, you're gonna click on that. And down here is your training program. This is now week 2. So you have new ones this week. It's gonna talk to you about hidden sugar. So questions that you guys have been asking and stuff. So this is a great resource. Hidden sugar, sugar and chronic disease, 3 substitutions for sugar, and chocolate chip protein cookies, right? So like, not that you can't have sugar, but like, let's learn a little bit more about it. Okay, cool. So I just wanted to remind folks of those in that they're like less than 2 minutes long. So you can bang them out when you do your normal like screen time on your phone. Okay.
How do we just hit, because I watch those, but I don't know, like, did I have to do something after I watched them? Like, was I supposed to?
So it'll show on here, like the circle, it'll show that you watched them all. So no, nothing on your end, as long as you watch them all.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I have a circle there. So does that mean?
So you're in a new week now. So I don't know if you've watched those today. So those came up today.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So these are new ones. They should be new ones from the last ones you watched. Or did you already watch these ones?
No, I didn't watch these ones yet.
Cool. So today is the day that like new ones come on. And so you have to watch them. And then they'll come down on Friday. And then your next week ones will be up this week. Okay?
Okay.
Cool. We're a little over, but I'm glad we were able to answer some questions. The group is always there for folks, and reach out if you need anything at all. Awesome. Okay, guys, have a great day.